So hello everyone, welcome to our fourth monthly meeting of Open Data Leaders. My name is Josh New. I'm a policy analyst at the Center for Data Innovation. We are very happy to have David McClure and Maia Hansen of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration with us today. David McClure is a lead analyst for Open Government Data Services, and Maia Hansen is a Presidential Innovation Fellow. So just a couple of logistic things. So who here is from public sector? And who, private sector? Is there anything in between? Cool. And who's a contractor? Okay, cool. So we are, as always, we're always looking for new speakers for upcoming events. Our next month's event will either be March 19th or the 26th. They're both Thursdays. We're trying to nail that date down, so mark your calendars. If you have any contacts in federal agencies that we haven't contacted yet already, that haven't been at a previous meetup, please feel free to send them my way. I will hound them completely on my own. You don't have to be tied to it. You don't have to be responsible. But any involved in the open data effort at any level of federal government, we'd be very happy to be engaged with. So we're going to do, it's going to be a little bit different than our traditional meetups. We're not going to do just presentation and then a question. We're going to do, it's going to be mixed in, so feel free to just raise your hand and make a question. Very gracious in letting you interrupt them. And then we'll do some questions at the end. This shouldn't go later than 8. And please feel free to get up any time to grab some food and leave a business card if you want to sign up for the Center for Data Innovation newsletter. So take it away. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's very fitting that today the FCC voted on the net neutrality rules, because just about this time last year, the appeals court struck down their regulatory scheme for technical legal reasons. And about that same time, I was looking at a draft of the RFI for our NOAA Big Data Partnership, which is the project we got talking about. And I used to practice law and license, but I've never been a government lawyer. So but when I read that, I started reading the draft, having just read about the net neutrality ruling, and I'm looking at this thing and I go, oh my God, it looks like they're trying to sell data. And went running into the program manager and said, you're just about to walk into the spinning propeller blade of a data neutrality issue. So my main contribution to the thing, to this effort since then has been setting up the policy scheme so that we could thread the needle between making a public data asset available to the public, but maintaining a level playing field. And it's been tricky, but we believe that that's one of the key elements of the approach that we're taking. But I'll finish my introductory comments by saying that while we believe that what we're doing is very innovative, and that's been the feedback that we're getting, it's really been a joint effort with the community. As much as anything, I think we really spurred by the private sector, sort of got the sense of what the general, all the ideas that were in the air, and all the requirements and all the wishes that people had to make this work, and what we really contributed is making probably the most complete package, I think, that's out there right now, the most comprehensive approach. The Maia sort of go into the details on that.
So first question, who here knows what we're talking about, this big data partnership project? Okay, so folks are reasonably familiar with it. The basic idea, and as Dave mentioned, an RFI on this came out about a year ago now. And the short of it is that NOAA has a crap ton of data. Just the satellite division alone produces 20 terabytes a day data. It's incredibly difficult when you're getting 20 terabytes a day to comply with President's open data policy, right? Because it takes a lot of servers, it takes a lot of human effort, it takes a lot of bandwidth. There's a lot going on there. So we right now are only able to publish about 2 terabytes a day of that 20. That's, again, just the satellite division. So there's also all the bathymetric data in the oceans. There's fish, there's runs for weather forecasts. There's a lot of data that we're talking about. So about a year ago, NOAA decided, with the help of Dave McClure and various other forward-thinking folks at NOAA, they decided that they wanted to try to find a way to leverage public-private partnerships to extend the reach of the infrastructure and make more of this data available. So the basic theory is that NOAA data is incredibly valuable, right, which has been shown, and when I say valuable, I mean not just from a protecting the earth and life and property sense, but also from a monetary sense. So all the big weather companies, for instance, have made a lot of money by using NOAA data to produce their products. So NOAA data, incredibly valuable. More NOAA data, there's data that we're not getting out right now that would also be incredibly valuable. So it's in the best interests of the private sector that that data gets out, right, so that they can use it and make money off of it. NOAA, meanwhile, is saying, we can't get it out, it costs too much, we can't do it. So what we're trying to do is basically broker an agreement whereby the private sector will help to make available and distribute this data in exchange for the fact that they get to use it and make products. So this was, and at no net cost to the government, right? So this is kind of the key thing. So this was released as an RFI last year, request for information, with the intent of putting it out as an RFP this year. And we released it, we got back a ton of great feedback, I think over 70 companies.
72
responded.
responses to the RFI.
Yeah. So we got a lot of responses to the RFI. Back in October, we held an industry day out in Silver Spring. We had over 300 people register from 200 different companies.
Yes.
So, you know, there's just been a huge amount of interest. At the same time as the industry day, we also released a statement of objectives, which kind of took that RFI and made it a little more crystallized. But our main goal in doing the RFI and the objectives and the industry day and all of this, we really wanted to try to engage industry in these conversations and let them be innovative about how this was actually going to work, right, in terms of, you know, how do we handle moving data around? How do we handle distributing it? How many companies need to be involved? Is it just one company? Is it multiple companies? Is it everyone? How is this actually going to work in practice? And the responses that we got back basically said, we need you guys to tell us how this is going to work in practice, otherwise we can't do an RFP, right? Because there's way too much risk involved. We can't step up and say, here, we want to bid on this RFP without knowing what kind of value we're going to get out of this and what it's actually going to entail in terms of infrastructure and all this work. So we took that feedback back, and we kind of noodled on it for a while. And that led us to where we are now, which is basically we're working right now to try to do research and development agreements with a few different companies. And we're calling these companies our anchor partners, because what we want to do is around each of these anchor partners that we're going to work with directly, we're going to encourage all the other 300 plus people, 200 plus companies who are interested in this, and the ones who didn't come to Industry Day, to join up with one of these anchor partners and effectively...
Well, one or more.
Yes, sorry, one or more of these anchor partners, and effectively form an ecosystem for the use of this data. So the goal here, and this is why it's a research project, right, to prove out this concept and see if this actually works. But the idea here is that anyone in this ecosystem, any of the companies out there in the market, should be able to make money in some way or another because of the fact that NOAA data is out there without actually selling data, which obviously is not okay. So conceptually, a cloud provider, for instance, would be able to make money because a new entrepreneur is using their cloud system to do compute on massive amounts of NOAA data.
Do you include cost recovery in the won't sell?
Yeah,
You will not
that's-
include cost recovery fees.
That's a good question. So we're, again, this is a research project. We are saying that cost recovery is okay. However, what we're hoping is that if this proves out the way that we think it's going to, or the way that we hope it's going to, there might be ways to have different tiers of access so that some of the higher tiers, like the big companies that are doing massive amounts of compute on massive amounts of data, will be able to help subsidize a lower tier, which maybe Jane Q high school student could access to do her science project.
Right, that's a key question. That's one side of a two-sided problem, the core policy problem. I'm not going to geek everybody out, although I'm perfectly capable and willing to do it on the refinements of that. But you touched right on it. And the interesting thing, and of course, at the very beginning, when I was doing my work, we hadn't gotten the feedback. We hadn't been able to engage much with the private sector. So I'm there trying to draw up the Platonic ideal of how you make it free but make it accessible to everybody, and it all really pivoted on the notion of cost recovery and how you do that. Now what's happened now, particularly since we have Maia and our other PIF, and the whole process has matured, we really engaged with the community, less Platonic and more practical solutions like a freemium type model that we're talking about here have come up to achieve the goal, effectively so what freaked me out when I saw the draft RFI was the public gets the data for free and no cost to the government. And I said, there's no such thing as free. There's cost in distributing this. Somebody's going to pay those costs. Where do they land? And how can the government really get this for free? We're in here right now, talking to you. We've been working on the project for weeks and months. I mean, there's been NOAA people working on the project for a year. That wasn't free, I hope. So that's really a key issue. But it is very interesting and very exciting to see how the sort of cooperative arrangement, I think, that we've tried to establish with the community, and we think we've done pretty well. They seem to be feeding back that they recognize it, that cooperative relationship has developed these kinds of solutions that we're looking at now.
So over the next several months, what we're really hoping to put in place is a set of what we're calling data alliances. And so each data alliance, there's one anchor partner that we'll work with directly, and then there are a set of other member companies that are engaged with that anchor partner to use the data, to make products from it, to give feedback about which data are most interesting, to really kind of mimic the entire market ecosystem as a prototype. Right? So we're hoping that enabling this data alliance concept and having a prototypical ecosystem stood up as we work through the kind of research process of this will help to prove out, or not prove out as the case may be, this theory that there's enough value in the data to subsidize the cost of providing.
Where would academic resources fall into that? They would be part of the alliance as well?
Yeah, we actually have one anchor partner that's kind of dedicated to the academic sector. So
Have you announced the anchor?
no, and yeah, so sorry, we're going to have to dance around a couple things here. We
I've got
haven't
these talking points here.
we haven't yet announced, because we're still working through the legalese on some of this stuff. So we are talking with folks. We haven't announced which companies we're actually working with, but we're hoping last week of March is the target date for big rollout of this.
So just so I understand this correctly, that academic resource that's working in that single alliance that has access, they have full access? Because from an academic standpoint, they may be nuts to soup to nuts, I mean, all over the place.
Exactly. Yeah, so the way that we're approaching the actual data distribution part of this, there are basically two research projects here, right? One is proving out the business model, and the other is the more technical aspect of getting the data to the public, moving the actual bytes, as well as kind of the secondary aspects of that, like cataloging, metadata, distribution, marketing, right, all of that stuff. So, so the way that we're approaching this is iteratively. We have a few core data sets that we know are in high demand from existing companies. We're going to start by making those available through this project. If that seems to go well and we're able to kind of make that work, then we'll progressively make more and more data sets available. And what we're hoping is that we'll be able to get feedback from the community about which data sets are most interesting to them so that we can move on. But to answer your question specifically about academics, our plan is to make all data sets available to all data alliances. So if one data alliance decides to specialize in weather, for instance, and just pick up the weather data sets, it's fine, we don't care.
That could also become competitive between your alliances.
That's exactly right, yes, and that's part of this too, is that there is going to be competition between the alliances, and this could feed into, again, the cost recovery question, right? There might be one alliance where the anchor partner decides to make this available for no cost, they'll just subsidize it, and that might mean that they get more partners in their data alliance, which then, you know, the entire ecosystem, the money all feeds back. Everyone's happy.
Yeah, we expect to see, well, we use the word ecosystem a lot. And one reason is because to have the variety, you know, to have several different attempts, several different efforts, several different channels that reinforce each other. We expect, and we've got strong agreement really through the discussions that we've had with all the players through this whole process, that the government will see efficiency gains by doing this, and that from the very beginning, the private sector said, look, they didn't really see the simple aggregation of the data as a profit activity. They saw that as a means to an end. So getting into straight economics, if it's nothing but a cost to enable you to get to your profit thing, then everybody's interest is in minimizing it. And so you have all sorts of scale arguments for, while there's competition, maybe on the value and on the, you know, the side products they sell making use of this data, there's an equal incentive on their part to work together to, as a group, drive down the cost. And we're leaving it open for them to figure out how to optimize it on their side. I mean, our first rule is don't break any of our stuff. And our second rule is none of you, it's basically a two-part rule, but our second rule is it's going to be a level playing field. After that, we're stepping out of the way.
Yeah, so there are a couple key things that we're including in these conversations, right? And that we're asking the data alliances to do. And the big one, as you said, is level playing field. So we're absolutely not going to allow any company to get privileged access to the data. That's not.
Are you, like, within the alliances, or is it complete data sets, like, or is it samples, or?
We will be releasing, yeah, it's a good question. We're planning to release complete data sets, right? Again, this is iterative and researchy and all that, so it will probably depend on how that works technically and what kind of response we get from the community and so on and so forth.
The reason I ask is there's a
But the
bit of a
plan is
trade-off
complete data
between,
sets.
like, you know, you guys are resource constrained as well. It might be a lot easier for you to, like, assess utility across a broader landscape with samples instead of spending a lot of energy on a particular smaller set, making complete data sets.
Yeah, no, that's a really
It's
interesting
true. Well,
point.
that-
What we are we do obviously have a lot of data sets up available now. And so what we're getting a lot of from the community are requests for finer resolution on some of those existing data sets. And because, especially like with the weather model data, right, because this is three-dimensional, if you increase the resolution, you're increasing the size exponentially. So it gets really big really quickly. So we, in kind of that sample data set way, we release a lower resolution on our FTP servers currently. And so we're getting asked a lot for these higher resolution data sets.
And part of the reason we're going at it as a research approach is, we realized we weren't able to define this whole thing tightly enough to support the demands of a formal RFP and contract. We couldn't, the minds could not meet closely enough to justify, it's not mature enough yet. But so a big driver for this research approach is to say, okay, it doesn't have to be all one way. So are there some data sets that are well understood and so valuable that they're going to put their effort into connecting to that thing and just pulling it in 100%? But then aren't there going to be other data sets or portfolios, larger business processes that are producing a lot of data where we can't really identify that data right now, and so what we need to do is come up with some sort of sampling method, to do that. And so by having multiple anchors, including profit-seeking private sector anchors and an academic research anchor, they're looking at different aspects of this thing. And so what we expect to see is a whole, an ecosystem of different approaches.
Right. I think you were first, actually.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to ask was, then how do you measure success?
Yeah,
How
excellent
do you
question.
measure success
Yeah.
for Alliance and say one's better than another?
Well, so
If-
from the
if we
NOAA
need to.
standpoint.
If we need to.
Yeah.
But still
So-
measure
Right.
something.
So from the NOAA standpoint, and I promise you I don't mean to be flip about this, it's successful if the data gets out there, right? It's successful if it works. And so it's almost binary, but there's the secondary aspect of it, which is the self-sufficiency of the process. And so, success means that we're able to push data out and that the ecosystem is able to support that financially as far as costs go. That somehow all of these different people making different products and money changing hands and using each other's platforms and whatnot, that somehow this all evens out and no one is stuck holding a massive bill. If we find that at the end of N months, years, whatever, that someone is stuck holding a massive bill and this doesn't seem to be working, then we reevaluate, right? And again, we're doing it iteratively so that we can do that at any point. But really the goal here is to get the data out without causing a lot of hardship financially.
So, I'm sorry, just have a clarifying, I was late and I apologize. So when you say no one's holding the bill, NOAA has a budget for developing all this data, that's a tremendous amount of money to manage all this. Are you guys trying to offset your costs? I'm sorry.
Well,
Yeah, no,
that-
it's okay, this,
And I apologize.
It's okay. Yeah, a lot of this was the first 5 minutes or
I'm
so.
sorry.
No, it's no
That's
problem.
budget stuff.
In real brief terms, NOAA has a lot of data. We're not making all of it available right now because we can't afford to.
Okay.
What we're hoping to do is form partnerships with the private sector so that they can help us make these data available in exchange for the fact that they get to use them, because we believe and industry believes that there's value in having the data out there. And so the theory, and we're doing research on this, and we're starting this process, which is what we're talking about now, but there's this theory that if we can get the data in the hands of entrepreneurs and businesses and companies and private industry, that they'll be able to make enough money off of products and derivatives and whatnot to offset the cost of the infrastructure needed to make it available.
Right, but we are explicitly not putting any money into it. But and I think you were already here, I mentioned that we have expectations for on NOAA's side for there to be efficiency gains. And that would allow us to then offset, by an efficiency gain over here, we could take the offset from that and put it to, apply it to putting the data out. Like say the people inside NOAA who would have to be managing this effort. So their salary could be coming out of, without getting down into real nitty-gritty of budgets. But if we find that because we've got this sort of central target to aim to, what had been stovepipes start lining up, inside NOAA, and all of a sudden resources are freed up because of the efficiency gains, then that can pay for NOAA's management of the process. But it is definitely a no net cost to the government, which is also a reason why we think that if this works for us, it would work for commerce, and if it worked for commerce, it would work for the government.
So we're hoping for kind of a flywheel effect, that if we iterate to start and it seems to work, that we'll gain efficiency, the private sector will make money, we'll be able to feed some of this back in conceptually to the whole system, and that then will enable us to get more data out, which then gets bigger.
So I think we have a question.
We have a variety of questions. Did you have a follow-up to yours?
Well, I guess my only other question would be audiences and consumers would NOAA help what these alliances kind of find or
Yes.
define these audiences and consumers that would use this data?
I love this.
So one thing that we are absolutely planning to do is help members of the Data Alliance find each other, right? I mean, we made public already on FedBizOps the list of companies that attended Industry Day and so on and so forth, so that people can kind of matchmake. Do you want to take that?
Well, I just love the Maia is already mocking up the website, which I refer to as the speed dating site to make that happen. So,
but yeah, as far as like the end users, the end
and
audience,
like,
we're
who's
staying
gonna
out of
pay
that.
the 3 cents to
No.
use this new service
We
or
are
this new
very
data
explicitly
product?
staying out of that,
Yeah.
in fact, because that is, I mentioned earlier, we're really interested to see what industry comes up with as far as innovation around the data sets. If we knew what to do with them, then, so we're really explicitly staying out of that and hoping that industry, in much the same way that the weather world, the weather marketplace has exploded, that there will be additional gains and new ideas and projects. Did you? Oh gosh.
We have a question. We have a
Everyone
question
is
over
raising
here.
their
Dennis was.
Please.
Presumably, the programs that are generating the data have legislative authority and budgets to do certain things. So the data have been gathered and generated in support of some very researchy and some very practical applied types of applications. This gets into the question of how do you measure success, because has anybody asked at this point, why do you have more data than you can possibly provide access to? Are we looking at spin-off? Are we looking at added value? Are we looking at totally innovative and unthought of useful products that we haven't dreamed about? And it seems to me it gets part of the cost justification has to get back to, well, why is the data gathered in the first place? And why do you have more data than you can efficiently provide access to?
Yeah,
It seems to me that that's a relevant issue, because at some point, somebody on Capitol Hill is going to ask the question, the data that's now being distributed and sold profitably by one of the
Yeah, to
Not
be
sold.
fair,
Not
data
sold.
doesn't get sold, but carry on.
a product or service is developed
Yes.
based
Thank
on
you.
a mashup of data from a variety of sources, including NOAA, okay? And this is encouraged by this
Yes.
program. Somebody in Capitol Hill is gonna come by and say,
Yeah.
why are you generating this data to enable the private sector to develop these types of products? What has that got to do with protecting the American farmland from drought, yada,
Well,
yada,
So
yada?
the-
I'm not saying that's a good argument, but I'm just saying,
Yeah, yeah.
that's how it operates in the real world. How do you avoid that?
Totally hear what you're saying, yeah. So, a lot of the data that we're talking about is raw data, raw quote-unquote data that goes into our models, for instance. So what NOAA produces currently, and the stuff that gets distributed currently, are really NOAA's products, effectively. So the data that is collected from the satellites, from the buoy system, from all of these different things out there is getting used by NOAA to produce the products, which then in turn protect lives and property in American farmland and so on and so forth. But there's residual data, right? I mean, the data has already been used by NOAA to produce these products, but it's still floating around. It's still on our system, still on our supercomputers. So maybe someone else can use it as well to make more products. So it's not like these are data that are just sitting around unused right now. They're being used as inputs to existing models. And what we're being asked for from the community is access to a lower level rather than just the model output and access to some of the raw data. Does that answer your
Well,
question?
so the legal canonical answer on it is, you're correct. The legislature appropriated funds to NOAA to execute a public mission.
If everyone could
No,
turn
no,
off their
no.
cell phones.
Yes,
please.
like it's really me. And NOAA has done that. Boom. You got your weather warning, you got your hurricane warning, but NOAA has done that. The data still exists. In some statute and certainly in a lot of policy, that data is identified as a government asset. Since we are the stewards of a government asset, we are required by law to take care of that asset. That asset unused is an asset wasted. And so Congressman, what was one of your companies, Generic Corp? Generic Corp in your district has got 30 people working for it, making use of that, that government data that we produced in the successful execution of the mission that you funded us to produce. That's why, we're setting this up.
I'll buy it.
Does that, okay,
It's
good.
it's an interesting twist on, we're all being told that we're supposed to, when we do our data development, identify secondary users. In
Exactly.
essence, what's going on is you're allowing the secondary users to identify themselves.
Themselves.
So it's kind of
exactly
interesting.
right.
Because who would know better than they? Who would know better than they? What they can do with the data?
Okay,
Just a couple of questions. One, I mean, the data you're talking about also, by the way, is used internally, right? I mean, we store it, we use it internally, and it's just too expensive to if you make all that data available, you're using the resources that the internal assets are using, right, and chew those up. So when so that feeds into, thank you, because that feeds into one of my points was no cost, if I put the infrastructure out there to store your data, you still got to deliver money. You've got to deliver your data to me, right? And you've got to offset, the cost associated with your internal use. In other words, to increase your capacity to not only manage your internal usage, but also to manage the demand for the public, right? I mean, and so, you got to think, there are a million ways to look at this. I mean, the telecommunications gateway, the family services fee type ideas where, and I was thinking that's what you're referring to when you talk about a tiered system, right? And again, where I'm getting hung up and not trying to figure out this idea of making money, right? So let's say I am Generic Corp, and I stood up this infrastructure, I invested a lot of money in it, and what I've determined is there's a certain data set, right? It's going to generate revenue, right? But the public needs, there are other data sets out there, for instance, climate reanalysis data has been sitting here, it's not accessible. Let's get it out there. Well, who needs it? Well, universities, right? Well, why don't they pay for it? Well, they don't pay for anything, right? And so you put it out there for a fee, they're not going to pay. They haven't done it, right? Now maybe, but is the model for generating revenue something too, like it says, family services feed, I can buy a pipe, a conduit into this, and I can buy a very expensive one, right? And me, Generic Corp, I'm going to make money selling that infrastructure, right? Or I can sell you, I'm Amazon, and I'm going to sell you computational resources to use to model or to add value to this data. And I'll sell you the data's free, but the pipe's expensive, right? These are all the different things, as opposed to, and again, you're going to get to some data that may not have that money-making ability, doesn't hit that corporation's GP of 30% margin, right? So it's going to be, it's mostly going to be used by quote-unquote the communities that access it for free. Because I would assume that this would have to have a free component to it, right? In other words, in this ecosystem, I can buy it, but as a general public, if you've got it, you've got to give it to us, right?
Right. Yeah, so a lot of good points in there. First of all, when we're talking about cost recovery and we're talking about corporations being able to cost recover, we're talking about cost recovering on the infrastructure. The data itself is not being charged for, can't be charged for.
Unless
right?
you add value to it.
Taxpayers have already paid
I'm going to
for it.
manipulate it, right?
Exactly, yeah, unless you add value to it, producing the product. The question about like less valuable, shall we say, data sets is a really good one. And we don't know how that's going to play out.
I fear that that's going to be
Yeah.
because there was definitely certain data that those weather companies want to get their hands on.
The hope is that over time, again, we'll see this flywheel effect. We'll see basically the larger companies and the more interesting data sets effectively subsidizing the less interesting ones. But we don't know how that's going to play out. Like, we don't even know that the model will work with interesting data sets yet, right? So the first step is, again, approaching this.
I mean, Amazon has the great example of the genome, right? And they
As a team project, yeah.
So the thing is, at the beginning, this is the right kind of discussion to be having. This whole thing actually got kicked off because, was it 4 in the radar data?
I can't get the radar looks.
So NOAA's had it's sort of the cousin to the family of services, right? So for 8 or 10 years, there's been this operation going on. NOAA's got radar data coming in. Let's say it starts at level 0 and then it's level 1. It's got level 1 processing, level 2 processing, level 3 processing as a public product, it's a final product. And for 8 or 10 years, there have been, I think, 4 private sector companies on their own dime put their equipment in a NOAA facility to connect, and I think they get like the level 2 thing, right? And that's been going, and it's all at their cost. They covered, they paid for the expense of the equipment, patching the holes in the wall, all that kind of stuff. That's been going fine. They've been making money on that. They're the ones that came to us and said, we've been making money on this level 2. We think we can make more money on the level 1. And besides that, there's this other data over here. We see it going by. We'd like to get into that too. In fact, we'd like to do it so much we'll pay for all of that, and we'll let the public have a copy of it. And so we took that idea and ran with it, and dressed it up, and strengthened the policy side of it, and so forth. So that's sort of the paradigm, and it's a market-driven. Everybody says, well, does the data have value? It's got value if somebody will put up some money. That means it has value. right? And if people say it's got value, but they're not willing to put up the money, we would go, you know, where's the value? You just said it. But also, though, as I was talking about where we hope to see efficiency gains in the government operations, we also expect to see that as this thing gets in place, and we have not the first instance of somebody putting up the money to get this data. We have the second instance of it because we already have the first instance of it. I just described it. So the second instance comes in, the third instance comes in. With each one of those, the knowledge gained and the breaking down of the barriers is going to lower the threshold. So the fourth instance is going to be less expensive. That means the presumptive value of that data set doesn't have to be as high, and eventually those lines will cross. Now, we're not funded explicitly to make all of the data available. We'd be very happy to do that when we get funded to do that. This is a way, though, to make this public asset available to the public for the benefit of, for the benefit of everybody. But, you asked earlier, what would be a measure of success? The measure of success would be Congress coming to us saying, well, why aren't you giving data to everybody? And we've got all these lobbyists telling us that we should fund you to give data to everybody. Why aren't you doing it? We're going.
First part of that.
Yes.
There are also, when we're talking about the costs that are going to be required in order to get the data out there, there's some of these technical costs, there's some that aren't, but there's certainly some that are one-time-ish, right, that are setup costs in order to figure out the processes, in order to make sure the network is routing the right way. Some of these things that that we're hoping, again, will work themselves out when we're dealing with the valuable data, quote unquote. And then, as Dave said, once we get to the less interesting or more researchy potentially data, that they'll be able to leverage the existing infrastructures and existing processes.
And you can see, too, that another agency, might be funded differently. They may actually have, and NOAA does have some explicit funding for making data available. There are things, the family of services, we were capitalized. We were funded to capitalize, and then we recover the cost from those who take the data. The only difference with what we're talking about, and really this is, in a sense, is a family of services sort of turned inside out. The key thing that happened with the family of services is the government couldn't take money from the private sector to make the thing happen. The government got the seed money to start the thing happening, and then was authorized to recover that cost as they put the data out there. So in that case, it was government it was tax funds capitalized, and appropriated funds capitalized it. What we're talking about is the private sector capitalizing it, and then being able to recover their capitalization.
I've been thinking about this a lot,
Good.
right? And the thing that concerns me is that, it's weather data, right?
Yep.
It's time sensitive.
Yes.
Very time sensitive.
Yes.
And it's massive.
Yes.
So now you're talking about, okay, I've got a center, I'm gonna push that. No, I want 4. No, I want 10. That's,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
those are scaling issues
Yes.
on NOAA's infrastructure,
Yes.
No,
on
that's a really-
NOAA's internal resources. Now, you've got to have a cost recovery method for dealing with the amount of scale. And I don't want to talk too much, but the other thing is, once you get this working and people are making money on it, now you can't fail, right? I mean, we know this,
No shutdowns.
right? And
Don't tell us,
and
don't come to
I was speaking to the gentleman, and is that from an operational standpoint, we would see issues where, the DOD were and FAA and all this, and sort of, they understand, right, and we have problems, right? Commercial sector does not. You got a congressman. They're gonna call their congressman, right? I mean, I'm sure you've
Yeah.
already thought of what you're getting yourself into
they're really
with this
good points.
specific data.
Yeah.
They're really good points, and there are a couple things, taking the second point first. It's already true, right? We already have companies that are using NOAA's data and get very touchy if there's any delay in it or if there are any issues, you know. So it's absolutely something that, that we're aware of, and also part of why we don't want to kind of open the floodgates on this, right? We don't want to just go in and say, here's all our data, because we need to put plans in place on our side to make sure that it's okay, that it's sustainable. The first point regarding scaling, you know, the way, and I apologize if everyone already knows this, but the way that NOAA gets a lot of its data out now is by satellite. So because we distribute to our various weather stations around the country, bounce it up to the satellite and it goes out to the weather stations. It just gets broadcast and they have dishes and they pick it up. As it turns out, that's also how a lot of companies get the data as well. So, you know, if you want to start a weather company, the first thing you do is you go out and buy a satellite dish and you put it in your backyard. And that model, as challenging as it could potentially be for smaller businesses, has a lot of benefits as far as scaling goes. Broadcast is an incredibly efficient means of getting the data out there. And so there are absolutely some technical challenges that we're going to have to look at. And that's part of what we're doing with the kind of technical research end of this, is looking at ways that we can approach this that...
If you're broadcasting data, then anyone can get it.
Yeah.
It seems to me we're talking about other data types in a day. Wow, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I know what
You have been waiting patiently.
So is ownership of the data sets, will it be like mutually exclusive between the different anchor partners? Like, so anchor partner A has ownership of the data on like buoys, and there are certain companies in anchor partner B that want that information. Will they be able to share that information?
So a couple answers there. First of all, they don't own the data.
Right. How to access it.
So for use of the word own there, they don't own the data. The taxpayers do, right? The second answer is our plan is to make the data available to all the anchor partners. If some of them choose only to pick up certain verticals, say, that's up to them. It could become a competitive thing. But we have no intention of just distributing some data here and some data there and some data there.
Right, and it would benefit them. That's where they have, in that, getting the data together and making it available to do the value add to. Inside that layer, to my mind, the natural economics are for them to join in cooperative arrangements.
Exactly.
You know, to do that.
So say I'm a startup at 1776, and like because of this new data, you know, we come up with a new business model that can leverage this. We get funding. We're going, you know, we're making our MVP and trying to get to market. Are you imposing any restrictions on the data anchor, the anchor partners, in terms of their SLAs and other, you know, if I build a company on the data, and since this is in the research phase, am I going to get the rug pulled out from under me after a year? And do I need to kind of take that into account in terms of the risk of my organization, or?
It's a good question. It goes back to what you were saying about you can't fail. If this works.
Well, not only,
okay.
and I think to your point though, your anchors can't fail either.
Yep,
That's right,
absolutely.
that's right.
Right.
So our, sorry.
I was going to say, well, imagine, a way of discussing this I've used before in other venues like this. Imagine two universes. One's the universe we live in, and the other is the universe. The universe in this other universe, somebody went to Congress, say the executive branch, NOAA, said, in the budget process, said, we think we can collect this kind of data and make this kind of storm prediction. And so that worked its way into the budget formulation process and ended up in front of Congress. Here's this part of NOAA saying if they have some money for a satellite buoy or whatever, they can get this data and they can make this kind of storm prediction, and it will have these positive benefits for society, and it'll cost, $100 million. Okay, sounds good. Here's $70 million. And NOAA also says in here, hey, by the way, when we're done with all of that, we're going to have this really great data that's just sitting around, wasting away. If you gave us $5 million more, we can make that available to the whole public. Now, in this alternate universe, the Congress goes, wow, that'd be great, because then companies could take that data and make money with it, and, you know, sure, here, and they would generate tax revenue, which would well cover the $5 million. Okay, make that $75 million, go do it. That's the ultimate universe. In the real universe, we got the $70 million, and we got a hearty good luck with that on the additional $5 million request, right? So that's kind of the setup
So,
here.
yeah, so to go back to your specific question, that very specific example, in this phase, we are not imposing SLAs. At some point, we expect that this will turn into an RFP down the road. It may be multiple companies, maybe whatever. And at that point, I think it's likely that we'll start talking in those terms. But for now, this is, you know, getting it started, again, just trying to be iterative and approach this as a research project.
Is there, this maybe I'm raining on a parade here,
No, please.
is there a, for lack of a better way to phrase it, a good Samaritan law that protects you all from spurious data analysis? Because I can spin anything. And at the point where the public feels that they've been taken advantage of, or a company feels that it's, or maybe a company is intentionally taking advantage of your data to produce false premise and market that, will you have oversight, or do you envision that kind of thing?
So the first answer to that, and I'll let him take the legal side of it, but the first answer to that is they could do it now, right? So there's nothing in this really that changes anything that's currently happening except for the method of delivery. Currently, NOAA makes a lot of data available. It's a percentage, but it's still a crap ton of data. And a lot of that is climate data, for instance, and other types of data. So if companies wanted to do that, they could do it now. And so this doesn't really change that at all. Do you want to take the...
So the short answer, Maia sets that up. Once the data is out there, it's out there, and we don't have, I don't believe that there's any liability that flows upstream to NOAA for making it. And I'm not the NOAA lawyer, so I'm not general counsel, but I'm pretty confident that that's the view of, and in fact, we're living in this world right now, not just NOAA, everybody else is putting the data out there. So in this arrangement, the first rule is don't break any of our stuff, right? So if they come in and they are engaged in practices which threatens our mission, then they're off. We just pull the plug on them. We haven't really talked about the case where somebody is like just egregious, using the data. What we expect, what we have talked about it, but what we expect would happen is that it's in the interest of the other anchors to have a little talk with the miscreant, because it's in everybody's interest to keep the thing straight. And also, relatively free speech. All the other partners could say, we're giving it to you straight. This tornado death panel company over here is but in a more sort of mundane thing, the issue of branding has definitely come up, and what we have made very clear, and we think it's a nice, neat, clean technical solution, and everybody's cool with it, is some sort of hash value certification that the data set in because it's a copy of NOAA's data, right? It's not tied directly in the NOAA systems. NOAA pushes it out once, and then it's in this private cloud. That copy is sitting there. It would have that, say, hash value that certified that copy is in fact a copy of the data that NOAA pushed out there. That's pretty much the boundary of NOAA's responsibility. That is the data that we put out there. But what they do downstream from that is outside of our purview. How does that sound? I'm just curious. How does that sound to you guys? Does that make sense?
Right, you are using, from from a technical standpoint, you are looking at a push model as opposed to a.
Yeah, it has real benefits for us from a security perspective. You know, to simplify the number of times
Right.
that entities are touching us.
So push at least to some sort of staging.
You guys, we have time for just one or two more questions, so.
I was gonna go back to your comment about if you're saying the weather company, you can just intercept all the data from the satellite. Do you have redistribution rights? I mean, what's to stop a company right now from gathering all of the
They're
data?
welcome.
Welcome to, and you could rebroadcast it or put it up in cloud, do whatever you want with it. And how many points do you have to collect from? Is it just like, is it centralized somewhere here, or?
There's a reason that of just the satellite data, the 20 terabytes a day, only 2 terabytes are going out. There's a reason for that. And this whole project is aimed at identifying those reasons, getting them together and getting them to start behaving themselves so that more goes out. If somebody could already do this, they would already be doing it.
Companies are doing that, though. Companies are.
Yeah.
Right, but what they're not just getting satellite data, they're getting buoy data, and they're subscribing to other feeds.
So not all of the NOAA sensors go through the satellites.
Correct.
And then there's there's the rest of the government with the other data, that they're doing. NOAA is doing NOAA's mission. We're going forward on it, but this is my little thing. This is what I'm here to sell. If it works for NOAA, it'll work for commerce. If it works for commerce, it'll work for the whole government.
But again, just to kind of readdress your core point there, the thing that NOAA wants to do is get the data out there, right?
Yeah.
And so any way that works,
I mean,
It's awesome.
part of what I'm thinking of is there's getting the data out there, but there's also how you get it out that matters. Like, there's latency, right? It's one thing to get it out there, a few weeks later. It's another thing to get it out there a few nanoseconds from when you receive it. Like, they're very
Yeah.
different things and they're very different cost structures.
and they're,
Right,
and
well,
they're
that-
very different technical solutions.
That's right,
Totally.
and that goes into the freemium model, and there's different, the research community might be satisfied with low and slow.
Yeah.
The mobile run inside, because it's about to start raining, group is gonna need it fast and heavy.
Which, how
That's
do you
why,
think about that in terms of like, where are you trying to get to? Are you trying to address the low latency crowd as well, or is it mostly the analysis research crowd?
We're trying to look at them both. And again, like I say, they're very different technical problems, and so this is where we're really hoping that by working with some of these partners, we can come up with interesting, innovative ways to solve the how can we broadcast over the internet? Can we see
Is there any mechanism in how you design the arrangements between the anchors and the partnering companies to provide feedback on the usage of the data to the government?
oh,
Yeah,
we'll
so
be working. We don't have it in place. Everybody knows that would be good for everybody. And so as soon as we can get this thing going, we'll start building that.
But
There are
we
mechanisms.
don't intend to define that relationship, right? So the relationship between, NOAA is working with the anchor partners. We are hoping to help enable the formation of these data alliances so that feedback can come back in. But the relationship that the anchor partners have with those individual companies isn't under NOAA's control.
Yeah.
The thing that we do request, though, is to hear the feedback, is to hear about what's coming in.
Right, the really interesting thing is, if we had, going back to the 70 million and the 75 million, if we had been given the $5 million to distribute the data, we would be going to the same people that we're talking to now and setting up a contract and then trying to push their price as low as possible, to do this thing. Whose names we can't, we can't put out there. But, so where we're going, on them telling us which.
If I'm producing if I'm running the program
The
that's
way-
generating the data,
yeah.
at some point, I want to know
Absolutely.
that it's having some benefit,
Yeah.
whether it's being distributed free
Right.
or whether people are buying stuff that's based on it. I would want to know that.
Right, so they're
Yeah,
motivated,
yeah.
they're motivated to,
Reporting.
yeah, they're motivated to tell us, we're motivated to listen, you know, to them. So that's what I say, I think it's motivation on both sides. It will happen, everybody. Oh, I'm sorry, so the interesting thing is, if we had gone out with the money, if it was a conventional contract, the limited resource that the government would have had, and that everybody would have been competing for, would have been the money, right? But as it turns out, the limited resource that the government has, that everybody is sort of competing for, is our managerial attention. You know, it's not our capability, it's just our capacities, the number of spare cycles we have to deal with people. So this overall structure of a relatively small set of anchors is a very efficient way because for us to make use of our limited resource, which is our managerial, you know, cycles that we can provide for that. And then they act as a single point to us, and then they leverage out to the community.
It's called outsourcing.
Yes,
So
exactly.
So would you see this replacing family services fees?
So to be clear, just to start, this is not intended to replace any of the existing NOAA services currently. Josh, do you need to shut us down?
I mean, if it's a quick question, I saw your hand was raised.
I don't know if it's quick or not, and you just may have answered part of this. So what do you see as your responsibility for curating, like quality aspects? Because I know I just got new breakfast today because we're putting some lives in place ourselves. I mean, you have very stringent things on data management plans, the quality. I heard you though say raw data.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I put
what
air
are
quotes
the
around.
alliance's responsibility if you were using this data as a bona fide service that you're already offering and you're curating it to a certain extent? What's going to happen when these guys perhaps take the raw data, as you said, and come up with a different?
So first of all, when I say raw data, imagine quotes around it. So there, you know, as Dave was mentioning, there are various levels of processing that data goes through. It's unlikely that it will get down to the absolute what's
the
coming
bid stream
straight
coming off the bid stream
the
coming off of
sensors.
sensors.
It would probably go through at least one level before it gets pushed out. But the curation question is a really good one and hugely important. I mean, right now, even the data catalogs aren't complete. The data.noaa.gov site, which has the catalog of the data sets, is incomplete. So that's part of what we're working on internally at NOAA with this is to, you know, as we identify data sets that are interesting that maybe could route through this process, we're also talking with the internal NOAA subject matter experts to find out, you know, what are their favorite data sets? What are some things that they know aren't getting out there currently or that aren't listed in the catalog? And how can we help create this process so that it makes it easier for them to catalog things and add data and curate and move things through the system?
Our scientists love their data. They will like this.
Oh, I know, but they're not as efficient. I work on government-wide data.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm not kicking out right now, so feel free to chat a little bit if you still have any questions, but we are going to start wrapping up. So thank you all for coming. Again, our next meetup is going to be on March 19th or March 26th. I'll email the group. If you have any suggestions of who we should reach out to, that would be much appreciated. And just as a side note, if you're interested in in federal policy in terms of open data, a little bit removed from this, where the Center for Data Innovation is going to be publishing a report soon called the 2015 Data Innovation Agenda. So everything the 114th Congress can do for data, open data, and financial data reporting are two of our big ticket items on that. So if that's something that interests you, feel free to check it out. It'll be on our website. You can subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll send it to you back. So thank you all for coming.